I'm here with Dr. Eric Anderson with the Natives at KU series that we're doing with Indigenous Studies and just highlighting people. So, hey, thanks for being on, Dr. Anderson.
You are most welcome, Ryan. It's nice to talk with you.
Yeah. You always have like a really good connection with the Indigenous Studies Department, and that's who we're doing the series with. I think that's somewhere we could start. What has your Haskell KU connection been like? You started at KU, right? For your education.
Yes, for my education. I didn't necessarily start the connection between Haskell and KU, but it has definitely blossomed while I've been here. When I was chair a couple of years ago, for a couple of years, I was really keen on fostering those connections,
right.
For a lot of different reasons. We're kind of sister institutions, if you will, by dint of the fact we, exist here in the same town.
Right.
I think in the past, sometimes Haskell, and maybe in the present, sometimes Haskell has lived in the shadow of KU because it's so much of a larger institution,
right.
and is much better known, at least to non-native people, right?
True.
So I wanted to be blunt, in some ways tap into their resources because they have more than we do.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that in a kind of a cavalier way or a craven way.
Right. Sure.
I'm saying it because that leads to the fact that can be of real service to our students.
Right.
We've had a number of students who have gone on to KU, and that means they're moving from an all-native environment to one where they're very much in the minority, as you know, and that can be really daunting, and that can be scary, to make that transition. So I wanted to make those connections so that, there's, of course you have your support networks here at Haskell close by, but to have good support there up on the hill. And I think that the Indigenous Nations Studies has really, really been kind and worked very hard on their end to make those connections happen, because now we kind of have a system in place where we can pipeline, if you will. Sorry, it's probably not the best word to use, but where we can, more easily transition students from here up to there.
So let's kind of reel it back a bit then. Okay. How was your experience being an Indigenous person at KU while you were there for your degree?
I didn't feel much in the way of scrutiny or anything like that. As you well know, look around this campus, Indians come in all shapes, sizes, skin tones, eye color, hair color, etc.
Right.
But people, non-native people, I think still, as a function of hundreds of years of colonization and the imagery that they associate with colonial stereotypes, that native people, look only one way,
right.
And so perhaps, I don't know if you'll know this term, it's kind of an old school one and referring to African Americans, but in a way maybe I was passing,
Sure.
People didn't realize, just by looking at me, that I am a citizen of a tribal nation. But,
right.
Of course, my mentor, my professors in the history program, knew that about, the ones I worked closely with anyway, knew that about me, But I didn't feel any kind of, on edge or like I was being, getting the stink eye or something, which I know some of our students have felt that way, or to feel perhaps like they're the token Indian, the one who is representative of all Indians in a classroom where you're talking about Indians and all eyes look at you as the expert,
Right.
When we're all from different cultures, and so you're not going to be as familiar with Laguna Pueblo
right.
traditions as you are with your own.
Right.
So you can't really answer questions for all Indians. Right. But yeah, for me, and especially my advisor, my mentor, the person who I worked with on my dissertation, she was very keyed in to American Indian history, and I think she taught it and thought about it in ways that very few people of her generation did. She was rather groundbreaking in the classroom in that way, in terms of how she looked at Native history. And she appreciated the Native students that were there, and there were a few of us. And I know for some of them it was maybe more daunting because they maybe did look more the stereotypical part, if you will.
Right.
But yeah, for me it was a great experience. The KU History Department was an awesome place to be in those years, and it was a really big department. It was a really diverse department in terms of the types of coursework being offered, and a lot of good support.
In your work in history, were how did your Indigenous connection kind of influence that? Were you able to incorporate that at all, or were there challenges there, or were there moments where you had to kind of decide?
All.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, I didn't grow up in a traditional way. I mean, truth be told, that no one does anymore in a truly traditional way. But
right.
I didn't have a connection with a lot of my tribal traditions, is what I'm trying to say. I knew the identity was there. We were proud of that heritage, but we weren't really deeply connected to it.
Right.
So part of this journey, part of this exploration was to learn more about that
right.
on my own. And that was a satisfying pursuit. I'm still learning, of course. Every professor should say that. Everyone should say that.
Right.
But so yeah, it was incorporated in that way, on a kind of personal level. That I had the freedom to do some independent study work and things like that, where I could really focus on, learning more about my tribal nation. And that allowed me later to incorporate some of that stuff into Haskell courses. It also was incorporated in terms of like the research being done for the dissertation, which is on the early years of Haskell and the boarding school environment. So thinking through that period, those experiences of those children or young people through the lens of Native cultures, I think really allowed me to convey something differently than maybe others would. And yes, there are questions too. As historians, I think we have to really face up to the fact that we incorporate and carry with us our own biases. History is not objective. I mean, it's evidence-based, and you go where the evidence leads you. At least that's what you ought to be doing. But you can't divorce yourself from those things. So, lots of stopping and asking questions about how Native people's history has been told in terms of that historiography, how it has changed, or maybe in some ways how it has not changed.
Sure.
How do other scholars talk about Native people? For instance, historians, even ones who are much more aware than those who came generations ago, still fundamentally, in many cases, rely on written documentary evidence that comes from, not from the tribes themselves, but from outside observers, who may not always understand what they see, and therefore may make the wrong judgments or draw the wrong conclusions, or at least not entirely correct ones. And that's something that we just have to deal with, because whether it's an argument about is oral history as valid as written, and from my point of view it certainly is.
Sure.
But that's still, I think there's some ongoing clash there. There's still some bias against oral history in the history profession. Or, how do we read between the lines of the documentary evidence that's been produced, that we, to some extent, do have to rely on?
Right.
So questions like that, I think, are emerging out of trying to see, in my case, the discipline of history through a Native lens. And the reason I mentioned biases or subjectivity is you want to be careful that you're not moving the needle completely the other way,
exactly.
and being biased yourself in judgments about what others have said or where they have arrived in terms of understanding.
So I don't know how much validity I have here to be thinking in these realms, but the way I've been kind of looking at it is nobody's seeking to rewrite history. We're more trying to expand history, and I think that making that distinction is hard to communicate or convey to the main, I hate to say this, but the mainstream narrative,
Sure.
And it's as Indigenous peoples, we just kind of have to recognize that exists. And
Historians are always, and other scholars too, but thinking through the perspective of my profession and my training, historians have to rely on what others have done in the past. We're building on their scholarship, We are revising and sometimes rewriting and sometimes completely moving past some of what those people had to say, but we have to respect in the context that it helped us to get to a point of understanding where we are now, whether it's something that we find was really maybe far ahead of its time, in some period where the major school of thought was something else, or whether it's something that we can look at today and say, well, that was really wrong, essentially, at least from where we're sitting now.
Right.
It might have seemed entirely right in the environment of that time. But at the same time, even if we find fault with judgments, conclusions, lack of complete evidence,
right.
If it sanitizes or overlooks the native part of the equation, we can't necessarily dismiss it out of hand.
Right.
We still have to take into account where that was coming from and how it got us to where we are now.
Right.
Yeah.
What further steps do we have to take between this Haskell KU connection? Kind of to bring it around back to that. Where would you like to see this relationship kind of expand? Because I know that's something I've been thinking about lately, and how it can grow.
Yeah, one way that I would like to see, I don't know if it's possible, but we're just speaking in the vacuum of the theoretical at the moment.
Sure.
We've done it before, so I know that there are probably mechanisms in place to make this happen. Again, I'm gonna speak very honestly. One of the challenges that Haskell faces constantly, always, is funding and resources. And so again, going back to what I said, I'm so thankful that KU is able to, share some of its largesse with us. I know they have faced budget cuts and they have, economic strains and concerns as well. But at the same time, they're dealing with a much larger operating budget, by far than we are. So all that leading to this, because of our lack of funding, what we almost always circle back to in our conversations here, whether it's in committee work or faculty senate or what have you, is kind of a foundational challenge is we don't have enough people to make what we'd like to make happen here. Right? We don't have enough instructors. We don't have enough support staff. And on and on. In any area you look at on this campus. And I'm not saying that like, oh, poor us, because we do great with what we have.
For sure. Absolutely.
I think we really do, a great service for our students, and we send awesome students up to KU and elsewhere.
Right.
But to cut to the chase, wouldn't it be nice if we could have some allowances, from KU for some of their instructors, some of their faculty, to get a, to have the opportunity to come down here and teach some courses, and that would add some more choices for things that our students can take.
Definitely.
Whether it's in history, whether it's in AIS, whether it's in math, or what have you.
Right.
And I also think that would be a really awesome experience for those professors to get to know our students and to get to know Native people in a way that that really few non-Indians either get the opportunity to or choose not to do for whatever reason.
Right.
And that's, I'm not saying that critically. I'm just saying that that's a point of fact.
Right.
So I just think it would be a great, kind of meeting on both sides of the aisle. That it would help us, and I think it could potentially, very much enrich the lives and experiences of folks from KU, and I think they would be, pleasantly surprised to learn about our students' lives and the kinds of things they're doing and the cultures they come from, and some of this truly amazing work that they are doing, or at least are capable of doing. Two things that you mentioned, about this keeping up connections with KU, and I just again wanted to say directly to the program up there, thank you. And we were just up there a few weeks ago, and
that was great.
And I want to see more of that, and we want you to come down here again, and we're going to make that happen. Sometimes I think it's easier for our students to show up in greater numbers when it's right here on campus.
Sure.
And the other thing you mentioned about, the possibility, or the imagining of the possibility, at least, of Haskell offering, master's level courses or something like that. And I sincerely hope that will come to pass at some point. Now, you're right in your estimation that probably that would entice a lot of our students to stay here at Haskell.
Yeah.
The nice thing about the fact that we don't, because I would love to have graduate students as well. That's a selfish thing. But something nice about the fact that we don't is we do have this great flagship state school right here in town. And, a lot of people who come to Lawrence, I think seems like the majority, they fall in love with the place and they stick around. And so it's an opportunity for our students to spread their wings, and go into this larger system of education, higher education, but to still have the comfort level to be able to be here in a town that has a sizable Native community and can support them.
Right.
So I just wanted to mention those two.
Very true words, Dr. Anderson.
All right.
Well,
Appreciate
thank you
it.
again.
All right, man.